Recording? Okay. Take two. I started a video and then realized that I forgot to order the books that I was reviewing today in order of like my opinion on them. Hi, my name is Auntie, and I am reviewing a bunch of kids' books I got from the library. I got a ton of books from the library. I'm only reviewing half the ones that I got from my last trip. I'll review the others in another video. I've still, at this point, as of recording this, have like videos that I haven't even edited yet, but have filmed, so whatever. I'll get them all out eventually, you know. So yeah, these are picture books that I got from the library, and I've got 11 of them here right with me now. None of them were bad this time. They were all pretty decent. I still could easily pick which one was my least favorite, but none of them were like, I hate this thing. Let's see. None of them were like, oh my god, this book is amazing either, so I guess it's all kind of within the neutral range, but much more on the positive side of neutral. Let's get into it. So this is my least pick. I always start with my least favorite of these books and go up towards my favorite one. This is my least favorite one this time. It says so bad. I read this aloud to some kids I was babysitting, and they were kind of like, bored with this, which might have been because we read my top pick first and then read this, and the top pick was a bit more engaging. So that's kind of my main problem with this book. Oh, this book is by Marie-Louise Gay. Yeah, that's her name. First of all, the art style. It's not really the sort of thing that I'm into. I don't have any real smart critiques here. I just this kind of thin line, slightly messiness. I don't know. It just feels like a failed Quentin Blake wannabe to me. It just doesn't appeal to me for no reason other than that it just doesn't. I can't really explain that. So you might love it. I don't know. Anyways, so this is a book that is very, it's very calm. It's very daily, like slice of life kind of vibe. There's not really any big rising action or anything, which is totally fine. I don't think that a kid's book needs to have that. It's just it's written with a lot of words, but not a lot happens. So it is a little on the dry side. But I wouldn't really be too annoyed by that. It's got some good moments of, you know, I guess, like, I like the part where the kid is exploring and he finds all these different things. Flowers shaped like his grandmother's pink teacups. He sees flowers that look like dragon tongues. He finds two treasures, a white snail shell and a yellow heart-shaped leaf, and he shows them to his mom. And that kind of, like, it's just some nice, like, childhood moments that I thought were, you know, sweet. So it's a little bit meditative. But overall, as I continued to read this book, I started to question, like, who is the person who wrote this book? Let's see if I can figure that out real quick. So the person who wrote this book lives in Montreal. I don't actually know what her cultural background is. Marie-Louise Gay. Marie-Louise sounds French, so I feel like she's possibly French-Canadian. I should probably look this up before I blabber about it. But anyways, the thing that's weird about this book is that, okay, so it's a story about a young boy who comes with his family, immigrates with his family to, presumably Canada, from some, you know, unspecified war-torn country. And I recently read a book, you know, The Most Beautiful Village in the World was what it was called, and I really liked that one. I think I reviewed it pretty good. Did I review that one on this channel? It's been so long I can't remember. And I you know, I'm not somebody who has like a really strong image in my head of what Afghanistan must look like, but part of the reason for this book, and I appreciated that it existed for this reason, is that it was speaking to an audience of people who thought of Afghanistan as this gray, burnt husk of a country, and just like, you know, dry, dull landscapes, when in fact the person who wrote that book traveled to Afghanistan with that perspective and then saw that it was this gorgeous, lush environment with its own, you know, like plants and fruit and birds and everything you'd expect in any country, really, and he kind of wanted to defy that image of the country. This book does not take that tact. It doesn't specify what the country is, just some war-torn country, and his mom wears a headscarf, and his name is Mustafa, so you could probably narrow it down if you knew enough about uh, specific world cultures and naming conventions, which I don't particularly. But they don't specify in the book exactly which countries he's from, and they do kind of demonize the country he's from. So there's these lines that start to creep in. Let's see, where is that? Mustafa's dream. Some nights Mustafa dreams about the country he used to live in, dreams full of smoke and fire and loud noises. Like, okay, there was a war going on. Maybe that's not talking about the country itself. It's just talking about the war, right? But then it says, Mustafa looks down at the park. It is so green. In his country, the trees were gray with dust and dry as sticks. And then that's when it starts, and this is pretty early on in the book, starts to feel like a bit judgmental. Like, starts to feel like it's talking about, like, he looks around and he's like, wow, Canada's so beautiful. My country was so ugly, and it's like, well, why are we saying that? Like, I don't know. That seems weird. Not only does it seem a bit rude and a bit judgmental, but it also seems a bit inauthentic, because I just have not. I don't think I've heard of stories from immigrants themselves about, like how their country just sucked. And this new country's so wonderful. Like, usually it's a little bit more complicated than that. Like, sure, people like have a reason for moving away from their country, but a lot of the time they still miss it, and they can acknowledge the things that they left from, but also acknowledge the things that they wish they hadn't had to leave behind. This doesn't have that nuance, and so it makes me suspect that maybe this wasn't actually written by somebody with the immigrant experience. And that'd be one thing, but if you're going to write from the perspective if you're going to write a book of the experience without having that experience yourself, it particularly stands out to me if that experience that you're describing is really judgmental of the other country. Like, that's a weird angle to take as an outsider. Sorry, I have to plug in my computer real quick. So that kind of bugged me. And then we've got this, he's like shy and afraid to experience the like place that he's come to, but then this like girl, kind of like invites him into her world, and it just feels very savoury. I mean, there's not the relationship between the two kids. There's so little detail provided there. They introduce each other's names, and that's the last page. But the whole book, it kind of seems like, look, you're here, you're in Canada, you can relax now. It's not the hellscape that your old country was. I'm like, I feel like that story needs to be told with more nuance and less of a judgmental tone. So, moving on. Carl and the Meaning of Life. Wow, I swear I'm not picking these on purpose, but here we are with yet another pro-bug book. This one is not told from a human perspective. This one's told from the worm's perspective. Most of the pro-bug books that I have are tend to take the format of like grown-ups telling kids like, bugs aren't bad, and it's like, kids don't necessarily think bugs are bad. It's the grown-ups who are telling us that the bugs are bad, so that's a weird place to get that message from. Anyway, that's not about this book. This book says Carl was not a bird, Carl was not a bear or a beaver, Carl was an earthworm. Anyways, this is a very straightforward story, and it's a little bit like Aesop's Fable moral-y, which is something that I don't particularly love. The earthworm is asked by the bird what his purpose is, or by some character what his purpose is, and he doesn't know because he's never thought about it. And so he leaves to try and ask all these other animals like how they found their purpose or what his purpose might be. And in leaving, he stops doing his job in the ecosystem, and the ecosystem collapses. And that's how when he comes back and realizes the ecosystem has collapsed, he realizes why he was needed and what his purpose was. Really straightforward. I feel like it's told with the least amount of personality that you really could have told it. It's not a bad book. Again, these are all neutrals for me at this end of the spectrum, but it's just really straightforward. It's like it's not an early reader, but it kind of has the energy of an early reader, and there are good early readers. I mean, there's Dr. Seuss and stuff, but like a lot of early readers are just like, and then this happened, and then this happened, without really, I don't know, without having the sense of fun, I guess. And so I didn't really get a sense of fun from this. It's got an environmental message about the importance of earthworms. It's extremely straightforward. The art style's fine, but I don't know. I do kind of have a I don't know. I have a little bit of a distaste for this kind of like detailed painterly style with cartoonish character designs. Although I think I've seen that done really well too. So maybe I just once again dislike this art style for no discernible reason. Very subjective. It always is. Anyways, I don't have anything to say about that, which I don't have. I'm trying to think of things to say about this book, and I can't think of anything more than to just describe what happens in it. So that fact alone should be the red flag for that book being a little bit on the lower side of neutral. Not terrible. If you want to read books about why earthworms are good, there's other better choices. But if you want to overload on tons of books about why earthworms are good, that one wouldn't hurt to add to the pile. That's Carl and the Meaning of Life by Deborah Friedman, I should have said. Okay, this one is When's My Birthday by Julie Fogliano and Christian Robinson. This one is decent. It's definitely reads as something for much younger kids. It's got... okay, first of all, I'll address my favorite thing about the book, which is the art style. Look at that adorable owl. Look at the way let's see, what's the best example here? Some of the kids are drawn like in a really super cute way. Where's my favorite one? Doesn't really matter that much. I shouldn't be wasting my time on this. Well, anyways, kid on the cover is probably the cutest. Anyways, but the kids are really cute. I like the style. I know I've read another book with this illustrator. Not sure who the illustrator is, and I can't remember what else I read. Christian Robinson probably is the illustrator because they're billed secondly. Anyways, moving on to the story. So there's a slight thing that kind of bothered me about this book, in addition to being like a little bit boring for me because it was a little bit like, it kind of feels like toddler reading level or like read to a toddler story level. The text is like, when's my birthday? Where's my birthday? How many days until my birthday? Will my birthday be on Tuesday? Will my birthday be tomorrow? Will my birthday be in winter? And here's the other thing that I have here is that this kind of starts to sound to me like the reading rhythm is very similar to like what's her name? Ruth. Hold on. It's right over here on my shelf. I've got a book by her. I've got lots of books by her. Ruth Krauss. Yeah. Open House for Butterflies and I'll Be You and You Be Me. It reads like it doesn't read like a Ruth Krauss book. It reads like it like the author read a Ruth Krauss book and wanted to write like that, which I get. I've fallen into that trap myself. I've read a Ruth Krauss book and wanted to write a Ruth Krauss book so bad, and I tried, and it's my most embarrassing book draft I've ever written. This is the most successfully Ruth Krauss page. I'd like a pony for my birthday and a necklace for my birthday. I'd like a chicken for my birthday. I'd like a ball to bounce and bounce. That sounds fine. This to me is like it doesn't succeed, it falls flat. First of all, it's not as daring and imaginative and weird as Ruth Krauss, and second of all, it comes across as kind of like, I think that the heart of what makes a Ruth Krauss book so fun is that it sounds kind of like it was written by like having a kid dictate while you write what the kid is saying. Like it really has an authentic childlike voice. This feels like in an attempt to have an authentic childlike voice, it kind of underestimated or dumbed down the idea of what a childlike voice sounds like. And I'm pulling a lot of criticism out of not a lot of source, but it's just this line. They say happy, happy day to me, and I don't know, like I'm being nitpicky, but that just kind of has the vibe of like doesn't feel authentically kid-like, and they say it again. It's the daytime. Here's my birthday. Happy, happy. He, he, he. I don't know. Like that seems like it doesn't feel like authentic kid. It feels like the idea of a kid in a grown-up's mind. It feels like I mean, maybe I'm being too critical because I'm not a kid, and I remember loving Teletubbies when I was a kid, and Teletubbies kind of talks baby talk to children, but this kind of feels like it's talking baby talking to children more than Ruth Krauss would ever do, and so it kind of bugs me because it evokes Ruth Krauss and then kind of falls flat of that ideal. So it's like a missed potential kind of thing. But the art is adorable. The story is extremely basic. There's no story really. It's just kind of like ramblings from a perspective of a kid excited for their birthday. So I would read it to like 2-year-olds maybe. Honestly, much older than that, I don't know if that would be really substantial enough. Okay, Apples and Robins. This one I would say this is Apple and Robins by I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Lucy Felix is how I would pronounce that. American style. Looks maybe French. This is a book that I would not recommend for the story, but I thought it was pretty delightful for the gimmick, which is these paper cut negative space kind of thing. So I'll show you. So on this page, you'll have these. On this page is just printed, whatever, and then on this page there's 2 holes cut out. This isn't a hole. And then when you overlay it, the holes become, they overlap with the red, and they become apples. And they take that and make it more of a complicated idea. Once you overlay this cutout over this picture, it becomes a ladder. My favorite one is when the storm comes, and you've got this big triangle cutout that goes over these, and it's a crack of lightning. It's cool stuff like that. Definitely a fun idea. Really, like simple, I don't know, like kind of feels like mid-century modern graphic design kind of vibe. And the story is, I don't know, very, very secondary. I don't even remember much about it. A bite of an apple is so sweet, but someone else thinks so too. Ooh, a worm. All you need for a bird are 3 bright triangles like the robin's whistle, and a red oval like its round red breast. It'll fly away with the worm and sit in my apple tree singing. It just is like providing a brief vehicle for these cool cutout pieces. So more like an art book. Fun. And if you got kids that can respect the delicacy of die cut paper, then I'd recommend it. But for me, neutral. I prefer a story. Teeny Tiny Toady. Okay, it's by Jill Esbaum and illustrated by Keiko Yamaguchi. I don't know if Keiko Yamaguchi is like from Japan or if she's Japanese American. Either way, before I read her name, I could tell that the art of this book was very influenced by Japanese art. It has to me has like a 90s Japanese art vibe. A little bit of Astro Boy in the eyes there, and a little bit of I don't know specifically what I'm thinking of, but I just I was a child in the 90s and exposed to a lot of because I live in a port city. I just exposed to a lot of Japanese art from the 90s, and this it just really reminds me of all the kids books that I read or not read but try and interpret from Japanese as a kid. So I love the art style. It's super, super cute. Like, super ultra cute. And it's toads, and they're great. The story is fine. Probably my favorite thing about the story is, I'm not usually big necessarily on rhyming, but this book has just, really consistently successful rhythm to me. A lot of the time I feel like, and I totally get it, it is so hard to write rhyme that follows a rhythm, and usually when I try and write rhymes, I know that that's difficult, so I intentionally break the rhythm, which might be annoying for some readers, but I just try and like mix it up. Don't get you too comfortable. Don't get you expecting a consistent rhythm, because I want to be able to kind of flow in and out. But if you're gonna try for a consistent rhythm, which I know a lot of authors are, a lot of them still kind of get tripped up and still kind of make it so that their rhythm technically works if you read the right inflection, but it's not an instinctive inflection to read, so you end up having to like reread a line or you break the rhythm. This book doesn't do that. Really good rhythm. I'll give you a little bit of an example, I guess. Hopping faster than she ever in her tiny life had hopped, hurry, scurry, wild with worry, Teeny flopped and plopped and slopped, dodging spider webs and mushrooms, leaping bugs and sluggy mothers, till she skidded through the door at last to gasp, "I need you, brothers!" Like, really solid rhythm. So, as for a rhyming book, awesome job. The story itself is fine. It's pretty straightforward, and here's where my issue with the book comes in. It's a book with a message. I don't love it when books have messages. This is a message that I can get behind, like I think it matters, so I don't particularly hate that it has this message, but it kind of is a good example of why I don't like when books have messages, because in the end, every beat of the story felt like it was just there to serve the it really felt like it was just there to serve the message to me. It felt like it was there to demonstrate an idea rather than to tell a story per se. It didn't feel like there was sections in there that were there just to be fun, or just to be funny, or just to be exciting, or like just to give you a sense of atmosphere, or just to evoke a time and a place, or just to demonstrate a character. Everything in here felt like it was straightforwardly in service of a sort of demonstrative moral lesson. And that, to me, made the story feel a bit lackluster, a bit stripped down in the bad way. There's definitely stripped down in the good way, but this kind of felt like not it to me. So, but the message of this book, this is basically a book about, it's like a feminist story, and it's sort of a critique of male bravado, certain aspects of toxic masculinity, and about like the mansplaining phenomena, which it kind of hides for a moment. I don't think that the first moment that you see these brothers arm wrestling and gorging on food and lifting weights, you necessarily get the point that they're supposed to be like big, strong men, and it's about that. The moment that you initially it seems like it's just a story about a very small Toad who, just happens to be a girl with these large brothers, and she relies on the large brothers to get stuff done, and she wants to help, and she's trying to help, but the brothers won't let her. And maybe at first you think this is just a story about, about what it's like to be a little sibling and to want to do your part when your big sibling seems so much more capable than you. But it kind of skews away from being that at this point, where it says, Teeny said, "You need a ladder. Guys, a ladder's what we need," says one of the brothers. "You're a genius, brother," one Toad said. "He rocks," the rest agreed. So, they take credit for her idea, and that's when you're like, oh, this is a feminist critique on society told through the perspective of these cute toads. Which, I don't know, it's a fun thing to critique. It's just that the book is too focused on being in service of that message, of a critique of that society and the state of society. So, mixed feelings there. Yeah. All right, this one's called The Giant Seed. I didn't know this when I got it, but this is another book with no words. You can have a book with no words, and I might love it, but the art has to be just perfectly my thing, and that's going to be the case. In this case, the art is not perfectly my thing. It's just a little... it's, literally dirty looking. There's specks, and it kind of looks like a bad scan. I don't know. It's not for me. Lots of fussy, unnecessary seeming lines to me. It's a story about these tiny, tiny pigs that find a giant dandelion seed, and they grow a giant dandelion, and then a volcano destroys their home, and they grab dandelion seeds and float away to safety. And that's the end. It's extremely simplistic. It kind of ends with it almost feels like a triptych that has just a few more pages than it really even needed. They find a seed, their home gets destroyed, they fly away from it. It's a really simple up and down arc. So not a lot going for it, but I still kind of liked it, because I like, tiny characters who can ride on dandelion seeds and have houses still. I think that's a fun thing. And I don't know, it was a peaceful little meditative read for a brief moment, Okay, this one's called Patience, Miyuki. I think I should say, yeah, now is when we're getting into my positive books. This one is on the lower side of my positive reviews because, the more neutral side, because it's a little bit boring. And also because I just feel like I have to say this book is extremely aesthetically based on traditional Japanese culture. However, it is written by somebody named Roxanne Marie Galiez and illustrated by somebody named Sang Soon Ratanavan, I think is how you pronounce that, neither of which sound Japanese. So I don't know who these people are or what their credentials are, but it does feel like it's maybe something that's very rooted aesthetically in the traditions of a specific culture, while not necessarily being rooted in that specific culture by anything other than aesthetics, which is, you can make your own decision about how you feel about that. That said, the art is drop dead gorgeous. Look at those beautiful dandelions. I don't know, what is this? It's like watercolor pencil, I think. Yeah, you can kind of see the pencil quality in there, and definitely the watercolor in other parts. Beautiful color, beautiful shape design with these like bushes that are perfectly spherical and these giant ginkgo leaves. Once again, you know, I'm kind of a sucker for it. I like tiny, you know, smaller than a flower people in stories, and this has got that going on. It does not address that. The story doesn't really talk about that, but it just is there in the pictures, and it makes for some pictures that I love and are really exciting. This is described in the text as a well, even though it's a bucket, and this thimble is described as a bucket. I like stuff like that. A lot of little like incidental drawings just to decorate the pages. I think that's kind of fun. Some really stylistic stuff. I don't know why her sandals have giant pencils attached to them. I don't know, and the clouds use like traditional Japanese fabric patterns. So, I don't know. It's just really pretty. Look at the colors. Oh my god. It's such a beautiful, beautiful book. The story is about a girl who wants a flower to bloom because it's springtime and she's impatient for the flower to bloom, and, you know, everybody tells her to be patient. So it's got a little bit of a, like, be patient, you know, moral to it once again. So I'm mixed feelings about the story. There's some interesting moments, though, because it really does do world building in a way that I like. It's set in a world that's a bit surreal, but it doesn't take any time to explain that. It just kind of drops you into it. You know, Miyuki can do all sorts of things like climb a ladder really high into the sky that you wouldn't necessarily think that someone could do, let alone somebody who's tiny, and they don't explain why she's tiny either. And in addition to that, you know, she like talks to things in nature, like she talks to a river at one point, and it's just kind of like accepted that that she's talking to a river. Like, it doesn't, like, you know, preface that with anything. And there's the language in the writing is sometimes sort of nice and poetic too. A flower-filled house caught her eye. A young boy in a silver moon-colored kimono was watering his garden. You know, there's just it's not overly flowery, but it's like a little bit of playful language or unique language that I like. Anyways, that's about all I have to say for it. Really, the main thing that I think this book has going for it is the beautiful, beautiful artwork. So rather than highly recommend this book, I would say I assume Sangsun Ratanavan is the illustrator. Yes. I would say let's look up some more books illustrated by that person, because that's what I want to see more of. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. These are definitely positives. I'm going to not have much bad to say for the rest of this video. This is Frankencran by Michael Hall. This is a really interesting format for a book. So there's part of the story even takes place on the back cover. The story starts on the inner like cover flap. This picture book has been canceled, and that stamp is all over the place. Here's the cast of characters, but it's been canceled. Here's a notice saying the book's been canceled. Here's been canceled. Can't believe it's been canceled, the characters say. It was my first starring role. It was my first supporting role. So the book is presented as it's a play by these Cran characters, and the book has been canceled because the Cran characters couldn't, they ran into trouble and they couldn't pull off the story that they had planned to tell you. But then, of course, in the process of explaining why not, they're telling another story. But it's kind of a funny thing where it's like, in the beginning of the story, they were like, okay, we're about to start the play. You guys go over, your entrance is on page 22. So you guys go away and come back on page 22, okay? And then all of this stuff goes down and everybody leaves. But that character comes back, or that group of characters comes back at page 22 and is like, hey, wait, where is everybody? So it was really, I read this aloud to some kids I was babysitting as well. Is really humorous. It was making them laugh. It was making me laugh. Extremely playful. Really, you know, it's not like I have never seen this kind of format for a story before, but it's a rare one to see, so I still get a kick out of seeing it. But a real, like, like loose meta convention breaking formatting for the story, and it feels very much like it sort of maybe has a message in there, but I don't exactly know what it is. I mean, which is funny to say in a way, because there's actually a page where they have a series of like lessons. Lesson number 1: don't forget to tell everyone in a story has been canceled. Lesson number 2: don't try to unscribble a scribble by scribbling on it. Okay, so these are lessons for the characters, not lessons for the reader, so it's not really a book with a lesson. And the effect is that it comes across very much like a kid playing a game of pretend with some crayons, or maybe a kid and a parent like riffing together and playing a game with their crayons. It has a similar voice to the play style of young children, which is great. I thought it was authentically done, and still really simplistic. Like, it doesn't really do much with that idea, but I think that that's okay in this case, because I think it does just enough to like have some brief fun for the length of a picture book, keeps the kids' interest, and then is finished. Just an idea that's presented with a sort of a meandering and not a super tight conclusion, just kind of playful. Okay, Ocean Meets Sky by the Fan Brothers, creators of The Night Gardener, which I have not read. Okay, so this one, which you can tell by the cover already, gorgeous illustrations. Some highlights here. This one, maybe kind of similar to my Big Dumb Invisible Dragon that I reviewed, I think, in my last video. It's a story about a child processing death in a way that is a little bit subtle and not in your face about what it's about, but you can kind of get it. And I don't know how much a kid would get it. I assume a kid would get it. I certainly get it as an adult. Finn lived by the sea, and the sea lived by him. It's a good day for sailing, his grandfather would have said. There's a little bit of personality in this writing. Instead of just saying Finn lived by the sea, it says the sea lived by him too. That's a really good example of like simplistic, not overly complicated, not arrogant, but unique, like personality-filled writing to me. So he talks about his grandfather. He decides to build a boat on the like anniversary of on his grandfather's birthday, but his grandfather has passed away, which they communicate pretty subtly, if I remember. And then his grandfather would tell him stories about the place that the ocean meets the sky. So that would be the horizon, right? And I think that's where you maybe get the first hint about where this book is going. But the idea of where he's going is initially just like he wants to go somewhere that his grandfather told him about, and that's why he's going, because he's remembering his grandfather and he wants to go to the place his grandfather told him about. What kind of becomes apparent, if not to the character, at least to the audience, is that once he reaches the place where the I'll look at that page. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. Once he reaches the place where the ocean meets the sky, first of all, it's not just the horizon. It kind of is a fun play on words, because it's not just the horizon. It's also a place where you can't really tell if it's the ocean or the sky. It's kind of both at the same time. So in that sense, it's like ocean meets the sky. And then you kind of realize that this place where it's kind of the sky, kind of the heavens, and kind of the ocean is maybe in fact heaven. And so that place where his grandfather told him about, the place where the ocean meets the sky, was in fact perhaps where you go when you're dead, which is why he sort of meets someone. The golden fish swam toward the moon. Finn followed. He wanted to say goodbye. It doesn't say that the moon's his grandfather, but you see his grandfather's face. So it's very subtle about it. He had so many questions, but he heard a voice calling to him from far away. It's enigmatic. It has the potential, I think, to evoke tears. It's a very sweet, sentimental, but kind of heavy message about remembering a loved one and missing a loved one and about death. It just really subtly works itself in there, which I really appreciate, because it has a respectful tone, respectful of the audience, respectful of the subject. It has a contemplative tone, which I think contemplative is the word that I would use to describe the place that I want books, the mark that I want books to hit when they're talking about death, because, especially the death of a loved one, because I want it to be somewhere, that takes it seriously, and takes the emotional gravity of it seriously, but at the same time doesn't do anything to wallow in sorrow or mourning necessarily, but is sort of like just accepting it, about acceptance. And this does a good job in that. It gives you space to kind of contemplate it, and it kind of, it's a story about the emotions of missing a loved one who has passed away, but it's done very, very metaphorically. So it's much more focused on conveying the emotion of that than conveying the literal actions associated with it, the literal reality of it. It's about the emotions, and I think that it was well done, and with beautiful illustrations to boot. So I'd recommend that as a book for processing death. Ho'onani Hula Warrior by Heather Gale, illustrated by Mika Song. Okay, wow. I never thought I would see the day. Never thought I would see the day that I accidentally got a trans book. This is a trans kid book. I've reviewed a few of them on my channel. I'm always looking for books about trans children, written for children. And you also may know, if you've seen my other videos, that I am frequently disappointed by the reality of those books that I find, because they aren't stories. They're just saying, trans people exist. Here they are. Accept them, accept them, accept them. They're normal. They're just like you. Look at that. And don't bother to tell a story. It's just kind of the bare minimum of like, oh, you want me to write a book about a trans girl? Or, oh, I want to write a book about a trans girl. Better just say, there are trans girls. They're not bad. And that's so boring. This one's not strictly about a trans girl. This one, this book does everything right. Now, it's not talking about my experience. It's not talking about my experience as a white trans woman in the United States. This is talking about, technically, I suppose, the United States. It's Hawaii. So this one obviously takes place in Hawaii, and it's rooted in Hawaiian cultural tradition, not any kind of Western concepts of gender norms or modern Western concept of transgender people, which I think is very much to its benefit, because I think that you could still read this as the kind of trans I am and see yourself in it. And I think that it's actually more beneficial to see yourself in a story that's actually rooted in, older, more culturally established traditions, because that makes it feel more real. You don't have to. I think there's a problem that I faced, and many trans women in my position face in Western culture, where they kind of have to internally fight against this transphobic feeling that maybe they're making it all up and they're just playing pretend. It's a lot easier to remember that you're not just making it all up and you're not just playing pretend, when it's rooted in and you can do this without necessarily referencing ancient traditions, or older cultures or more established cultures, but when you exist entirely within the world, I think, of modern feminism as your basis for your understanding of your transness, you do have to kind of actively fight this feeling that maybe you're just playing pretend like everybody says you are. But yeah, when you focus on your transness, not in the context of such modern developments, but in the context of, perhaps older cultural traditions, or on just like the humanity of your situation, the humanity of how obviously, gender is a more modern construct, and if you go to the root of your humanity, it's you can shed a lot of the modern constructs around gender that are partially responsible for that feeling like you're playing pretend, and make you realize that, oh no, it's valid to feel like the way that you feel, because that feeling comes from your humanity, not necessarily from the culture around you. And connecting to the ancientness of the the not quite girl, not quite boy feeling, I think is a really important tool for anybody who is trying to process their own off the beaten path feeling of their own gender. Anyways, back to the book. Sorry about this. The other thing that this book does, and is possibly more important to me, is it's actually telling a story. Yes, it's a story that focuses on not just a, I don't want to say trans, it's not a trans character, but I think it's safe to say gender non-binary character. I don't really know how to speak specifically to it because this is a Hawaiian tradition that's talking about. So I guess rather than try and translate the Hawaiian tradition into modern feminist terms, I will read you this. In ancient Hawaiian culture, every person had a role in society. Mahu, people who embraced both feminine and masculine traits, were valued as healers and caretakers and teachers of ancient traditions. In Ho'onani Hula Warrior, we hope to show that, in the spirit of this Hawaiian tradition, we can make room for all people, Kane, Wahine, Mahu, and show every person the same unconditional acceptance and respect. Which is great. Oh, there's an author's note that I never actually read. Anyways, so this story is less about trans people specifically, but about Mahu people. But the Mahu tradition is how we would describe in modern feminism as outside of the gender binary. So in that sense, I think that people from other cultural traditions can see themselves in this too, even if they don't, necessarily aren't actually a part of this tradition or a part of this identifier. But it's definitely focused around a character from who is this Mahu traditional kind of archetype, and it does to some extent focus on their Mahuness, but it does it in a really secondary way to the story, which is like, I cannot believe this is literally the first time I've seen that done in all of my reading of these picture books. I haven't read that many, but like I should have seen this earlier. I'm so relieved to see it now, and I didn't even see it coming. I opened this book not knowing anything. I didn't have any idea this was about any kind of gender stuff at all. Ho'onani Kamai did not see herself as a wahine girl or think she was a kane boy. She just preferred Ho'onani. So this comes up because she wants to... There's a high school traditional... our high school kane will perform a traditional hula chant for a school performance. And she just wants to do that. She doesn't want to be a kane or be a wahine. And I don't think she's even that focused on... They don't mention Mahu outside of the original initial note, I don't think. But she wants to do this traditional dance that is traditionally for kane. But she doesn't want to be a kane specifically. She wants to do the dance. And that is important. I think it's really important that these books about trans children focus on the things that the child wants to do outside of be a girl, and not just wear a dress either, right? Like, I think we need to focus on the things that the child wants to do. And if you want to focus on what the child wants to do in a trans context, choose something that is a barrier to trans children. And I think that the key to this is to tell simply a story from the trans child's life. And I know that a lot of these trans stories are framed as if they are doing that. But when it's just like, I'm trans, and sometimes I worry that people don't like me because I'm trans. And so then I met people, and some of them did like me for being trans. Yay. Like, it's not personal enough. It's too... And I'm trying to critique this accurately because that feels not personal enough. And then I do feel like those stories try and solve that problem by adding in lots of, like, they traditionally have a lot of these moments of, like, and here's all these things that make me unique and just me, and not, like, these aren't gendered things. These are just, like, I'm an individual person. I'm real. I'm human, But, like, those always feel kind of like an aside to the story, a little side dish to the story. It's like, here, look, here's a little proof that I'm human, and then here's my story, which is entirely about... people not accepting me right away or people accepting me for who I am, and that's cool, and that proves that I'm okay. It's so boring. Here's my example, right? I have a lot of stories from when I was a child that are pretty blatantly about my being a trans child, but you could tell them without ever necessarily mentioning my transness. I wanted to play soccer because I had a huge crush on this girl, and she wanted me to play soccer with her. And I was so honored to be included in that. The sports in my school were gender segregated. So in order to play soccer with my friend, with any of my friends, because I had no male friends, I had only female friends, I had to be on the girls' team. And there's a story there about that being looked upon as strange by the teachers, but it was very accepted by the children, because the children that I went to school with understood, kind of just intrinsically, they could tell. Without calling me a girl, they were like, oh, for whatever reason, Addie definitely does belong on the girls' team. That's very obvious. Addie counts as someone who's on the girls' team, whether or not she's a girl, right? So, there's a story that can be told there, and that's what this story successfully does. It tells a story about a child who wants to do a thing. And there's a barrier there because of gender issues, but the goal is not to become a gendered person. The goal is to pursue their interests and to pursue their personality and to pursue what makes them unique. And there are some gender issues that are a slight barrier to that, but they overcome that. And that's as much as needs to be said to communicate that this is about a trans person, or in this case, not necessarily a trans person, but a Mahu person. In this case, right? But you get my point. And she meets a little bit of pushback from her family. So it's a little bit like she's being judged for that. And I think there's a nice moment where the sister who's resistant to her gender nonconformity in the end does accept it, but it's not really harped upon. She just stands up with the crowd to clap at the end of her performance. One of the things I really like this is that there's this is put in the context of Hawaiian culture without kind of explaining itself to a non-Hawaiian audience, which I appreciate even as a non-Hawaiian person for being immersive, and appreciate I can imagine that being appreciated by Hawaiian people for not being a story about Hawaiian culture that's actually secretly targeted towards a non-Hawaiian audience. Like it's towards it feels like it's towards a Hawaiian audience, which is great. And my favorite part about that is the sort of chants. And I was reading this story aloud to these kids, and I don't know that I babysit, and I don't perfectly have the pronunciation necessarily accurate, but they do a good job of making the chants in a larger text and communicating through a little bit of the text, a little bit of the words with the way that they describe the chants, that they're really supposed to be powerful. And that's important to the story, that there's simply by saying these chants, this character is asserting herself as the person that she is, whether that's as just Ho'onani, or whether that's as a Mahu person, or whatever it is. She's asserting herself as a person. And that's a much better way to me to say I'm human. These books about trans children are very focused on proving that trans children are human. And usually that's done by showing the people around the child accepting them as human and showing that that's the right thing to do, and even sometimes saying outright, that is the right thing to do, sort of, This one shows that they're human by having them express things that are sort of viscerally human, and I feel like that's done in this case through these chants, and through something else, but I'll get to that. No time to think, words pushed against her lips, and the chant tumbled out. Ai kamumukeke, and I feel like you have to read it like that. I've never listened to this, I've never seen this performance. I don't know how accurate that is, but I just had to read it with this force, Look at the larger text, sweeping her warriors into a tidal wave of voices until Ho'onani called the end. Hi ala ala, hi, sorry, hi ala, ayo, aoi, like that. Like, it's very, like, you gotta, And then when the actual performance comes along, like, oh man, like, the illustrations do a good job of communicating the strength of this too. But, like, look at this. She felt their curiosity stir in the darkness, and she held her place, strong, sure, and steady. Ai kamumukeke, her voice thundered, right? You gotta I am here. I am present. My voice is heard. It's coming from my body. I am part of the earth. I'm part of humanity. Like, it's just like I'm connecting to root humanity. And that proves you're human in such a visceral, emotional way, without even having to say, can you just please trust that I'm human? It's just like, I am. I am, you know? And it's great. And there's this repeated phrase throughout the story where it says, when Ho'onani saw complete awe and true acceptance, she held her place, strong, sure, and steady. And that's repeated many times throughout the book, is that she's strong, sure, and steady. And that means so much to me. That's something that needs to be repeated to children who are unsure of their place in the world because they are gender nonconforming. That it doesn't matter where you fit in. You can still be strong, sure, and steady. You can fit into yourself, and that can be where you fit in. And you can be strong, sure, and steady, and that strong, sure, and steadiness can create the place where you fit in, and can establish a place to fit in, can make room for you, and showing that as such, like, just without saying, and that was a good thing. It just, you can feel how good and important that is. Showing that a trans person can, or a Mahu person, or gender nonconforming person can establish themselves, and that's a good thing. That's not a rude thing to do. That it's a good thing to be strong, sure, and steady. It bears repeating, and this book bothers to repeat it. So I liked it, and I read it aloud to these kids who had no particular connection to the gender nonconforming issues presented here, and they were thoroughly entertained by the the challenge set up to this character, and the way that they overcame it with power and an exciting chance, and these moments of strength, and almost, and it's a hula warrior, a very warrior-like spirit, and so it was just inherently thrilling for these kids to hear this story, and they enjoyed it without even having the context for it. And that is what we need, because those other books that I read, for all of the merits that they may have, I think would be boring to people who aren't, who it's not particularly relevant to people who are not gender nonconforming. Those books would hold no particular draw, and that is a detriment to us. We need those books to be being read by non-gender conforming people too, although we also need them to see ourselves in those books as children. But it needs to be a book for everybody, not only so that we get non-gender conforming not only so that we get like people who are gender conforming reading these books and accepting non-gender conforming people because of that, but also you need the books about you to be normal, to feel like you really are, not normal, but like to feel like not an outcast. You know what I mean? You need your books to just be able to mix in with all the other books. The books about you to be mixed in with all the other books, and to be, to easily be accepted as one of the books alongside all the others. To feel like you're not just some weird outlier. You're, you may be unique, you may be different, but you also have a place there with all the other books. You're not a different kind of book that's just, a special book that somebody wrote because, because you needed it particularly. And so we're going to here's this other kind of book that's not particularly fun, but it's there for you because you need it. Like, no, just give us a normal book and have us be there among the normal books, among all of the books, among the books that tell stories. Sorry, that was so long. My last book is Snoring Beauty. I'm not going to talk about this one as long as that one, and you might think that means that I don't like it as much. And maybe on an ideological level, I don't like it as much. But in terms of pure reading enjoyment, this one was a blast. Once again, I read this to kids aloud. They were laughing hysterically through the whole thing. I was laughing as well. This book is, rooted in medieval fantasy tropes, which is not my vibe. It's a riff on a classic fairy tale. It's called Snoring Beauty by Bruce Hale, illustrated by Howard Fine. So obviously it's a sort of a riff on Sleeping Beauty. It's brash, it's goofy, almost like a well, it's not a Shrek-like humor. It's more like a Stinky Cheese Man type of humor, which Stinky Cheese Man is better than this book, does it better. But, my point is, this is the kind of book that I don't particularly want to like, and I would never put it in my collection, but I have to admit that it's hilarious, and that's pretty much all it has going for it. But you know what? Sometimes you just need a really funny book, and if you need a funny book, this one does it. There's this there's this narrator, this frog, who kind of has this sarcastic, he says yada yada hippity hop, he has this sarcastic, dismissive attitude towards the story, kind of mocking. They've got stuff like this. They've got 7 of the funkiest fairies you've ever seen: Hexus and Blexus, Nostraline and Umpudine, Phlebitis and Tinnittinitis, and Fred, who wasn't really a fairy, but no one had the heart to tell him. And you can see Fred in there, see him better on this page. Fred's just this like guy in among the fairies. It's just like got moments like that all throughout the book. It's really silly and playful and goofy, and it's King Gluteus and Queen Esophagus are the names of the royalty. This has my top spot, not because I think it's this amazing book, not because I think it breaks any boundaries. It's in the tradition of Stinky Cheese Man, and Stinky Cheese Man did it better. Also, by the same authors, I would say it's in the tradition of The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. And once again, True Story of the Three Little Pigs did this a lot better. Riffs on classic fairy tales with a lot of sarcastic, almost adult feeling humor. But I have to admit that this was the most fun to read out of these 11 books, and it's funny. Lots of moments like this. Then one day, a dusty young man clip-clopped into town. "What's that awful noise?" he asked a milkmaid. "What?" she shouted. "I can't hear you. I'm wearing earplugs." I don't know. It's great to have a funny book like that every now and then. And I haven't read one in a while, so I appreciated it. I guess that's all I have to say about it. Nothing too special, but fun to read. I would recommend that. Although if you want funny books, I've got other ones that are funny that I recommend more. Like Creepy Pair of Underwear by Aaron Reynolds is a book that I would highly recommend if you want a book that is hilarious for both the for the reader as an adult, or as an adult reading to kids, or for the kids that the book is being read to. Super funny book, great illustrations.